Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. I will be the first reporter of this group, and my name is Alaisa Adi. So, the research or the article we had chosen entitled English and Mother Tongue Based Multilingual Education, specifically language attitudes in the Philippines. And this was written by the researchers Amar Mabub and Priscilla Cruz in 2013. So, in reading the article, the researchers discussed the discovered problems concerning the proposed utilization of mother tongue based instruction in the Philippines. So, we are all aware that English language was still used up until now in education and have privileged this language all over the local languages in the Philippines. That's why this marks a drastic shift in the Philippine languages in education policy, and it also have led to specific attitudes to language that will impact on the success of the mother tongue based education. So, the researchers argue that even though the mother tongue based education policy is for strengthening the national and local languages for standardization of the education, there is still a problem that will rise and may affect the positive results of the mother tongue based education. So, they also argue that Philippines should address the attitudes towards language before the mother tongue based policy strengthen the English linguistic imperial position. Moreover, Amar Mabob and Priscilla Cruz had a survey on language attitudes conducted in the Philippines, and this survey specially asked the respondents about what they perceive to be the role of English and other Philippine languages in education. So, we will find out the result in this survey later on. So, the keywords are mother tongue based multilingual education, Philippines, language attitudes, and language affiliation. So now let us proceed to the introduction of this article. So this paper had examined some of the issues in relation to this by focusing on English and mother tongue based multilingual education in the Philippines. So actually this study is important or necessary because it will add to current discussion on the mother tongue based education in the Philippines by considering the results to a attitudinal survey that reflects what some Filipinos perceive to be the rule of English and local languages, including the Filipino, in education. So, in this paper, it will first look at the current discussion or debates on the mother tongue based education in the history of English and Philippine language policy and planning. Second, it will present the results of an attitudinal survey on languages in education in the Philippines. Finally, it will discuss the results of this survey in light of the current language policies and planning in the Philippines with a look into the possible features of English and mother tongue education in the country. Then, it will end with a brief discussion of how a study of the Philippines is relevant to other countries with similar issues as well. So now let us proceed to the background of the study. So we have keywords here, the colonial policies, education and English language policy and planning in the Philippines. So I will just give you a brief discussion in this one. So the researchers just stated some recaps about the colonization happened in the Philippines. And since we had been colonized by several countries such as Spain, America, and Japan, they stated or discussed the language policies and planning happened in every colonization, and what was the contribution of the language policy and planning during that colonization to our current educational system. So, all in all, their goal is to root the language attitudes revealed by the survey and historical process of the language policy and planning that have shaped these attitudes. So, moving on, the researchers started with the Spanish colonization, wherein they stated that during this time when Spanish ruled the country, one means of control was to limit access to language and education except for the ilustrado class that was generally composed of wealthy Filipinos who were economically and socially positioned to conform with and support Spanish colonial agendas. But what really mattered to this paper on the language policy and planning is the fact that language was a means to divide the rich and the poor. So, unlike the Spanish, the Americans knew right away that education was a powerful weapon in their colonial arsenal. So, it was easy for them to bring English to the Philippines because of the positive attitudes of Filipino towards them, as well as the incentive given to the Filipinos to learn English in terms of career opportunities, government service, and politics. So, although there were issues of whether English was the best language for education in the Philippines, local languages were not used as media of instruction, since in the first place, teachers were trained to teach in English. Therefore, English was pushed as a primary language of literacy, with local languages as the auxiliary languages to teach character education, good manners, and right conduct. So, the American language policy and planning then led to what Risento in 2000 calls a stable diglossia, with English as a major language of their higher education and socio-economic and political opportunities, while the local languages were restricted to other functions. So, even though Philippines gained independence from the US in 1946, English language was still there. There was no independence from English. However, because of the positive results of a few studies on the mother tongue education, the Philippine government decided on a formula for language and education that involved local languages. So, the most important development was the formal introduction of a bilingual education policy that stipulated the use of English for science and mathematics, and Filipino was to be used for all other courses. However, Gonzalez in 1998 and Bernardo in 2004 pointed out that because of the economic advantages, English has remained as the most dominant language of literacy despite efforts to widen the domains of Filipino. Moreover, Arroyo's position on bilingual education has raised concern that it could be weaken Filipinos' English skills and make it harder for them to work abroad. The need for English has been made even more important by the BPO industry in the Philippines, which has set up big call centers and hotlines in English. According to Lockwood in 2009, Arroyo wanted to make sure that Filipinos get the most out of their education by making sure they learn English and live in English, with the time allotted for the language in all learning areas being no less than 70%. In 2008, the Philippine Congress was worried about people losing their English, so they proposed a new bill called House Bill 3719, and this bill was based on the idea that mother tongues should be used in education, not just English or Filipino. So we have looked at the history of language policies and planning in the Philippines, and it's clear that English has been the dominant language for over a century because of the economic and linguistic policies that have protected it. So everyone knows that their home language, whether it's Filipino, English, or something else, won't help them in international relation, trade, or business. So all in all, the relationship between language and economic opportunities was first established by American colonialism. However, Philippine government policies have been consistent in their prioritization of the global labor needs, such as providing English-speaking Filipino workers or local customer service workers to overseas freelancers. So, the linguistic divide between the wealthy and the poor, which was seen during the Spanish colonization, is still present and in a modified form, with the idea that if one does not know English, they remain poor. So after discussing all of this, the questions are, is it possible then that the House Bill 3719 will mitigate the grip of English over the country? Then, with mother tongue based education, will the Philippines see a lessening of the gap between the rich and the poor, a gap that the language policies help maintain? Then how do Filipinos perceive the rules of their languages? What are their perceptions and attitudes? So to explore these questions, my groupmates will discuss the result of the attitudinal survey that the researchers conducted. So I will end my discussion here. Thank you for listening.